I used to believe betrayal came with warning signs, loud arguments, obvious lies, clear evidence. I was wrong. It arrived quietly, wearing a familiar face, sleeping in my bed every night. My marriage had lasted 15 years. Not passionate anymore, but comfortable. We had routines, shared meals, silent evenings on the couch. I thought this was what long marriages looked like. Trust had become automatic. My best friend Sarah had been in my life for 22 years. Her daughter Maya grew up in my house, calling me Aunt Claire before she even understood what family meant. I never questioned their presence. Why would I? They were safe. They were known. They were mine. The first crack appeared as a feeling I couldn't name. A shift in the air when I entered rooms. Laughter that stopped too quickly. Glances between them that lasted too long. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself not to be paranoid. I told myself that love meant trusting without proof. At night, lying beside my husband David, I stared at the ceiling and felt something pressing against my chest. I had no evidence. Just a quiet voice inside me that wouldn't stop whispering. And I ignored it, because listening would mean admitting that everything I trusted was already broken. The changes started small. David became more generous with excuses, more careless with affection. His phone never left his hand, yet he smiled at me less. Our conversations grew shorter. Our silences stretched longer. I blamed his stress at work. I blamed the passing of time. I blamed myself for expecting too much. Maya started visiting more often. Too often. Always with a reason that sounded perfectly normal. Dropping off groceries for her mother. Asking for advice about her job. Waiting for Sarah to finish getting ready. She moved through my house like she belonged there, like nothing had changed, like nothing was happening behind my back. I noticed small things. The way she dressed when she knew David would be home. Not inappropriate, just more carefully chosen. The way her voice became softer when she spoke to him. The way his shoulders straightened when she walked into a room. I swallowed my discomfort and reminded myself she was practically family. She had known us since she was 6 years old. One Thursday evening, I came home from the grocery store and found them laughing together in the kitchen. When they noticed me, the laughter died instantly. The silence felt thick and heavy. David kissed my cheek quickly, too quickly, and stepped away from the counter. Maya suddenly found her phone very interesting and wouldn't meet my eyes. That night I couldn't sleep. I replayed the moment over and over in my mind. The truth was hovering just beyond my reach, waiting for me to grab it. But I didn't want to see it. Seeing it would demand action, and I wasn't ready to tear apart my entire life yet. Denial became my new skill. Perfected it. Every warning sign received a logical explanation. Every strange moment found a convenient excuse. I protected the illusion of my marriage with the same energy I once used to protect the marriage itself. But the unease refused to leave me alone. It followed me through my days, sat beside me during meals, whispered when I tried to sleep. I stopped participating in my own life and started observing instead. Watching patterns. Listening to tone. Noticing details I had trained myself to ignore. Maya knew my schedule perfectly. Too perfectly. She arrived when I wasn't supposed to be home. She left just before I was expected back. David suddenly volunteered to run errands during those exact windows of time. I noticed how he showered immediately when he got home, how his cologne smelled different, how his touch on my skin felt like a stranger's. I checked our shared calendar on my phone. Nothing looked suspicious. I reviewed our bank statements. Everything seemed clean and normal. Whoever they were becoming, they were being very careful about covering their tracks. One afternoon, I found a long strand of blonde hair on my pillow. My hair is dark brown. I held it between my fingers, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, and then I laughed quietly at myself. It meant nothing, I told myself. It had to mean nothing. Maybe it came from somewhere else. Maybe it blew in through a window. I threw it away and closed the trash lid firmly. That was my last act of willful ignorance. The moment my world shattered was painfully ordinary. I came home early from work on a Wednesday afternoon, unannounced, my head full of grocery lists and dinner plans. The house was quiet when I stepped inside. Too quiet. The kind of silence that holds secrets. I heard movement upstairs. Soft sounds. Deliberate and rhythmic. My pulse thundered in my ears as I climbed the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. I stopped outside my bedroom door and stood there for a moment, my hand hovering over the doorknob. The sounds coming from inside told me everything before my eyes confirmed it. I didn't burst through the door. I didn't scream or cry. I opened it slowly, carefully, as if my body had completely detached from my emotions. What I saw in that moment will never leave my memory. They were tangled together in my bed. In the bed I shared with David every single night. In the sheets I had washed just 2 days earlier. They froze when they saw me. David reached for words that didn't come. Maya scrambled to cover herself with my blanket, shame finally appearing on her face but arriving far too late. I stood in the doorway, completely numb, memorizing every detail of the scene with terrifying clarity. I didn't cry. I didn't speak a single word. I simply turned around and walked away, closing the door quietly behind me. That silence was the beginning of my revenge. Shock is not a loud emotion. It's cold and heavy. It slows down time, sharpens every memory, and seals your feelings behind thick glass. I moved through the next few hours like a stranger living inside my own body, watching myself from somewhere far away. They followed me downstairs, scrambling into their clothes, pleading and apologizing and trying to explain. David's voice cracked as he begged me to listen. Maya cried and said she was sorry over and over. I said absolutely nothing to either of them. Speaking would have given them power over me. My silence starved them of any response to manipulate. That night I slept in the guest room. Not because I was afraid to be near David, but because I refused to give him the gift of my presence. I lay on the narrow bed and stared at the pale wall, and I began reorganizing my entire life inside my head. I didn't confront him with questions yet. I needed perfect clarity before I allowed chaos to begin. Emotion clouds judgment, and I needed mine to be absolutely razor-sharp for what was coming next. By the time morning light crept through the curtains, I knew 3 critical things. The affair had been going on for months, it had happened repeatedly under my own roof, and they both believed I was weak enough and broken enough to eventually forgive them. They were catastrophically wrong about me. Revenge doesn't begin with screaming rage. It begins with cold, calculated patience. I began documenting everything with methodical precision. Patterns of behavior. Text messages I glimpsed over shoulders but hadn't yet captured. I became invisible in my own home, moving quietly through rooms, letting them underestimate me completely while I collected ironclad proof of their betrayal. I installed monitoring software on our shared home computer. I backed up phone records from our account. I photographed receipts, calendar entries, and every small inconsistency I discovered. I learned how often betrayal hides in plain sight, protected only by the trust of the person being destroyed. Maya grew bolder with each passing day. She stayed longer during her visits. She touched David casually right in front of me, testing boundaries. I let her continue. Every risk she took became another piece of evidence in the file I was building. David grew careless too. His guilt made him sloppy and distracted. His lies started contradicting each other. His stories shifted depending on which version he thought I had heard. He stopped checking whether his excuses made logical sense. I consulted a divorce lawyer in the next town over, somewhere David would never accidentally see my car. I provided my documentation. I asked careful questions without revealing the full scope of my intentions. I learned exactly what I was legally entitled to, and precisely how to secure every bit of it. At night, I returned to sleeping beside David. I felt absolutely nothing when his body was near mine. The love had evaporated completely, replaced by something much steadier and more useful. Pure purpose. He slept peacefully beside me, completely unaware that he was already losing everything. The most difficult part wasn't the pain, it was the pretending. Pretending nothing had fundamentally changed. Pretending I wasn't counting down the days until I could watch his comfortable life completely unravel in front of him. I laughed at his jokes when it was expected. I participated in conversations when it was necessary. I became the exact version of myself that he believed he knew, because familiarity breeds dangerous complacency, and I needed him complacent. Maya's presence in my house became almost unbearable, but I welcomed her visits warmly. I invited her to stay for coffee, asked about her day. I watched her squirm slightly under my steady gaze, unsure of how much I actually knew. That uncertainty, that fear, it softened her arrogance beautifully. Sarah, her mother and my supposed best friend, noticed nothing wrong. Or perhaps she chose not to see what was happening. Either way, that willful blindness would come back to haunt her later when the truth exploded into public view. I scheduled meetings with my lawyer. I filed preliminary paperwork. I redirected finances legally and quietly into accounts David couldn't access. Every single move I made was carefully documented, every step completely defensible in court. When David finally sensed something was wrong between us, when he noticed my distance, it was already far too late for him. He asked one evening if I was feeling okay, if something was bothering me. I smiled gently and told him I was just tired from work. That night, he held me like I was a lifeline he was afraid of losing. I stared into the darkness above our bed and silently counted every single betrayal. I wasn't angry anymore. I was simply ready. The confrontation happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I've learned that ordinary days make the best turning points in life. David came home from work expecting dinner and normalcy. Instead, he found legal documents laid out neatly across our kitchen table in organized stacks. I told him to sit down in his usual chair. My voice was calm and even. I didn't raise it once. I didn't insult him or call him names. I simply presented the facts I had gathered. Evidence. Timelines. The photographic proof. Everything laid out like a prosecutor's case. His face collapsed in stages as he read through the papers. Confusion first, then creeping fear, then desperate panic. He tried to deny some of it at first, but there was simply no room left for his lies. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. I told him I had already filed for divorce. I told him our joint assets were legally frozen pending the proceedings. I told him his options for the future were now extremely limited, and every single one of them was bad for him. He broke down completely. He begged. He apologized. He blamed confusion and loneliness and temptation and his own weakness. He said Maya had pursued him, that he'd been vulnerable. I listened to every word without showing any reaction on my face. When I finally mentioned Maya's name directly and told him I had evidence of her involvement too, something inside him shattered completely. I told him to pack a bag and leave our house immediately. To leave permanently. As the front door closed behind him, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Pure relief. The house exhaled with me. Maya tried desperately to contact me. Text messages filled with apologies and explanations flooded my phone. Long emails appeared in my inbox. I blocked her number and deleted every message without reading a single word. She didn't deserve my attention or my anger. Sarah called me next, her voice confused and hurt and defensive all at once. She demanded to know what was happening, why I was shutting her daughter out. I told her the complete truth in a calm, measured voice. I explained exactly what Maya and David had done in my bed, in my house for months. The silence that followed my words was deafening and deeply satisfying. By the end of that week, everyone in our social circle knew what had happened. Not because I went around gossiping or making dramatic announcements, but because truth spreads faster than lies when it's supported by solid evidence and genuine shock. David moved into a cheap temporary apartment across town. His bank accounts were restricted by court order. His carefully maintained image as a good husband began to fracture and crumble in public view. I watched from a comfortable distance as natural consequences unfolded around him. I didn't interfere or add fuel to any fires. I didn't need to. The truth was doing all the work for me now. The divorce proceedings moved forward with cold efficiency. They were brutal in their honesty and completely fair in their execution. David realized far too late that everything he had built in his life had been built with my support, my work, my presence. Without me, he had almost nothing. The final settlement was signed and notarized 6 months after that terrible Wednesday afternoon. I kept our house with all its memories and potential. I kept the investment accounts we had built together. I kept the stability and the future. David kept his regret and his shame and very little else. Maya disappeared from my life entirely and completely. Her ambitious plans for her career collapsed under social scrutiny. Her reputation in our community never recovered from the scandal. I heard she eventually moved to another state to escape the judgment. Healing was not immediate or simple. Some nights, the betrayal resurfaced unexpectedly, sharp and painful as the first day. I would lie awake and feel the anger and hurt wash over me again. But the pain no longer controlled my choices or my future. I reclaimed every space in my house that they had contaminated. I changed the entire bedroom. New paint color, new furniture, new sheets and blankets. I opened windows and let fresh air push out the stale memories. The bed no longer belonged to the past. It belonged to me now, and only me. I began the slow work of rebuilding myself, not out of desperate necessity, but out of genuine desire. I wanted to remember who I was before David, before the marriage, before I had shaped myself around someone else's expectations and needs. I traveled to places I had always wanted to see. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected during my marriage. I rediscovered what silence felt like without the weight of loneliness pressing down on it. My strength returned gradually, built on a foundation of hard-earned self-trust. I learned to listen to my instincts again instead of dismissing them. That quiet voice that had tried to warn me, I promised myself I would never ignore it again. Occasionally, I heard updates about David through mutual acquaintances. None of the updates were good ones. His life had spiraled downward in predictable ways. I felt no satisfaction hearing about his struggles, only a distant sense of neutrality and completion. My revenge had already been served. Quietly, thoroughly, completely. There was nothing left to add or take away from it. I learned that betrayal reveals far more about a person's character than love ever could. Love can be an act, a performance. But betrayal strips away all pretense and shows you exactly who someone really is when they think no one is watching. The house felt like it was truly mine again. Every room held new memories now. So did my future. I wasn't living in the shadow of what was taken from me anymore. I was building something entirely new. I stopped replaying the past in my mind like a broken film reel. I stopped wondering what I could have done differently. The past lost its power over my present the moment I decided it had taught me everything it could. Forgiveness came eventually. Not for David or Maya or even Sarah, but for myself. I forgave myself for not seeing it sooner. For trusting when I shouldn't have. For staying quiet when my instincts screamed. That self-forgiveness freed me in ways revenge never could. I understood something fundamental. Survival isn't loud or dramatic. It isn't screaming or breaking things or making grand gestures. Survival is steady and quiet and persistent. It's waking up every morning and choosing yourself again. I learned to trust my instincts again, completely and without second-guessing. That inner voice that knows the truth before your mind accepts it. I listen to it now. Always. I sleep peacefully now, finally. My bedroom is my sanctuary again. The sheets are clean. The air is clear. No ghosts live in my bed anymore. I lost a marriage that was already hollow. I lost a best friend who was never truly loyal. I lost a version of myself that was too trusting and too afraid. But in losing all of that, I gained something infinitely more valuable. I gained myself back, whole and unbroken and stronger than before.